Good morning, guys. I want to spend a little bit of time with you talking about how to evaluate heifers. And we'll get to a point where we'll actually evaluate bulls as well. But I've got a little class of Hereford heifers up here that you can see a one, two, three, four on each one. And I want to spend some time breaking them down just a little bit and kind of talking about the positives and the negatives of each one. And then you'll actually have a little worksheet that's got 20 questions on it that I will have assigned to you that you can go through and answer those questions for a grade as well. And this will kind of be the first phase of us kind of working into where we'll write reasons for livestock. Okay, if you guys remember, I attached that well, judging livestock 101 in the middle part of the week, and it talked about some different terminology and that kind of stuff. And now we're kind of looking at a set of heifers and to try to bring all of that terminology back around where we can utilize it in judging livestock. The heifer that we have up here in one, if you take a look at her, when we talk about femininity, we're basically talking about the front portion of that heifer. And one that is pretty clean shouldered, the shoulders blend well. They're not really bold shouldered. If you look at this heifer here, she is bold shouldered. That's a bad thing. We want heifers with a really pretty feminine front shoulders. And the reason for that, when a heifer calves, the first things that come out is the head and front shoulders. So genetically, if she has big shoulders, a lot of her calves will also have big shoulders, and lots of times that can lead to calving difficulty. So we don't like heifers to have real big shoulders, kind of like this heifer here in two does. She's really pretty big shouldered. This heifer here is really clean fronted, very feminine fronted. Then if we want to go to an extreme, we go down here to the four heifer, and she is very, very feminine fronted. She's even more feminine fronted than the one heifer. Very clean necked. Doesn't have a lot of skin here. Femininity, the more skin that you get up here in this front end, this heifer has a little bit of throat latch skin here. That takes away from that femininity. So, from a femininity standpoint, the four heifer is the most feminine. The one heifer would be second, and then the third heifer would be third in femininity, and then the two heifer would be last in femininity. Now, if we talk about depth of body, that is the depth from the top of their back all the way to their navel. Is their depth of body. Depth of flank is from their pin here, from here in the center region right here where you see the flank area. Okay, and then heart girth is right here to the point of the top of their shoulder. Um, so you got 3 points here, here, and here. Depth of heart girth, depth of body, and depth through their flank. Okay, we like heifers to be about as deep in their heart girth as they are in their flank. So if we drew a straight line, they would be, fairly deep and such as that. So if you look at it from a depth of body standpoint and spring a rib, we don't like heifers that are real flat sided. We like them to be bold in the rib shape, kind of look like a barrel, and rather than kind of a flat sided barrel. And so the heifers, as we look at them from body standpoint, the heifer that is the boldest bodied or boldest ribbed is this four heifer down here. She is the deepest also through her flank, okay? And she also has some depth here in her heart girth. If we draw a line from here to here, she is the most straightest also in depth of body. Now, which one most closely follows suit? This heifer here also has, number two heifer, has some depth as well as fairly close as one. Personally, I think two is a little bit deeper. Now, number one, she gets shallower in her flank. She does not carry the depth all the way through her flank. Okay? Now, the one that's the worst and most shallow in her flank is the three heifer. If you look here, if we drew a line straight across, she would have a lot of daylight right here where she gets cut up in her flank. Okay? So and then from a boldness of rib, round rib, she looks very flat sided. So the worst, flattest bodied, shallowest bodied, or least amount of depth in her flank is three. Flattest ribbed heifer is three. Boldest ribbed heifer is four. Deepest in her flank is 4. Um, Now let's talk about muscle. The two heaviest muscle calves in the class are 4 and 3. 4 is definitely carries her muscle deeper. With this area right here is what we refer to as her stifle, and she carries her muscle deeper into her stifle, and then if you notice the shape here, she has more shape here and carries it deeper than anything in the class. She definitely looks like the most muscular heifer in the class. The 2 heifer is also very muscular. She's very what we call broody. And a lot of times a broody heifer is one that's also comes with sometimes having a little more rougher front end. Okay? Now, the 1 heifer is fairly close because if you look at her, she also has some muscle shape, but she cuts in right here at her stifle really fast. Okay? And she also looks the least mature of anything in the class. All right? Now, the worst muscled heifer is definitely number 3. Look at her here. You do not see any roundness to her muscle at all. She looks very flat. She also looks like up here in her hip that she falls off her hip really fast. So the least muscled heifer in the class would be 3. Heaviest muscle would be 4, followed by 2, followed by 1, and the worst being 3. Now let's talk about biggest bone. We look at bone here on their legs, okay? So if we look at those, the biggest boned heifer is 4. Okay? 4 is the biggest bone, probably followed by 2, followed by 1, followed by 3. Okay? Let's look at length of body. We do that from their withers back here to their pin bone. Okay? The longest bodied heifer is probably going to be 3. She is probably the longest, followed by 2, maybe followed by 1, and then into 4 probably. 1 and 4 is very similar. And now, levelest from her hooks to pins. Hooks and pins is here to here. Hooks and pins. Remember on your diagram. Levelest, that is by far number 4. Okay? She has the biggest, squarest hip in her, is number 4. All right? Probably next would come over here to 1, followed by 2, and then followed by 3. Okay? All right? I think those are the major points that I covered in your worksheet that you're going to have. But look at these heifers individually, and as we start writing reasons, every heifer, the first thing that you're typically going to do is make you a sheet that says good and bad, good traits, bad traits. Because as you remember, when you're going to break them into pairs, when I judge this class, I place this class 4, 1, 2, 3. Okay? The 4-1 pair is a pair that most closely resembles one another. And then 2 and 3 are quite different from one another. But 3 gives up so much muscle that she has to go in 4th place. Okay? But we're going to talk about them in pairs. So paragraph 1 would be 4 over 1. Paragraph 2 would be 1 over 2. Paragraph 3 would be 2 over 3. Okay? We would start out by, I place this class 4, 1, 2, 3. I chose to lead off the class with the cleanest, most feminine fronted heifer. She's also the deepest, boldest ribbed, as well as the most heavy muscled heifer of the class. She also is the biggest boned heifer of the class. So in count, she overpowers the entire class. The heifer that I chose to lead off with in 1 or in 2nd place is also a very feminine heifer, but she gives up depth of flank as well as muscle to complete with the heifer in the 4th heifer here that is in 1st. Now in my middle pair, I have 1 over 2. In 1, I have a heifer that is very clean fronted, very feminine fronted, very long in her design. A heifer that also has some muscle to her. However, the heifer I grant the heifer in 2 here is a heavier muscled female that also is has a lot of shape in her hip. But I criticize her for lacking femininity in her front end. And one thing I didn't talk about is I'd like to straighten her up off of her rear legs as well. She gets pretty set in those rear legs. Okay? So then you would say I would criticize her for her lack of femininity as well. Then our bottom pair, here again. Then we're going to talk about muscle. In two, I chose to lead off in my bottom pair with two, the most heavy muscle, boldest rib, biggest bodied heifer of the pair. But and I grant that three is a growthier heifer with more femininity, but she just lacks total muscle to compete with the heifer that we have in the two heifers. So you can kind of see how I'm kind of trying to break those down as a class, and that's what you will be doing once you start writing these classes and writing those reasons for beef animals. Guys, if you have questions, don't hesitate to give me a call or to send me a message or whatever, and we'll talk about them some more. But go back, and I've pretty well answered all your questions on your worksheet, and make sure you get that turned in. Thank you.